Last night felt different the moment I turned off the light. It wasn't just the silence in the room or the way the air held still, like it was waiting for something to happen. It was the space between us, the kind you can measure in inches but feel in your chest. That space wasn't always charged like that. But lately, with every glance, every laugh that lingered too long, it started to feel like something was shifting. My name's Josh. I'm 23, a psychology major finishing my final year of college. I overthink everything, keep a playlist for every mood, and tend to read into people more than I should. It's a habit one that helps me understand others, but sometimes leaves me completely confused about myself. And then there's Drew. Drew, my roommate for the past year, is everything. I'm not. He's athletic, easygoing, always the center of attention without trying. The kind of guy who wears confidence like a second skin but still knows how to listen without judgment. He's 24, a history major with a love for late night, documentaries and cold leftover pizza. We met through a housing forum when I needed a room mid-semester, and I didn't expect him to be so grounded or charming. It started small shared jokes during laundry, brushing shoulders in the kitchen, the occasional late-night chat when neither of us could sleep. I told myself it was just good chemistry. But then I started noticing things I wasn't supposed to, the way his voice softened when he said my name, the way his arm would rest too close to mine on the couch, the way he'd laugh at things I barely found funny, like he was watching me. More than the show, and I hated that I noticed, because I didn't want to ruin what we had with thoughts that might not be mutual. Still, the awareness crept in, uninvited, and made a home in the back of my mind. This weekend, Drew suggested we stay in. No parties, no study groups. Just the two of us, relaxing. We'd both had long weeks, and I think he could tell I needed the quiet. So we ordered Chinese food, watched a bad horror movie, and ended up talking in the dark, sprawled across our beds like we were teenagers at a sleepover. That's when it started, that feeling like time slowed down, like something was going to change between us, and neither of us knew how to name it. He asked if I ever missed home, and I said sometimes. But what I didn't tell him was that being here with him felt more like home than anywhere else ever had. He was lying on his bed, one arm behind his head, his eyes catching glimmers of streetlight through the blinds. I could see the rise and fall of his chest. I could hear his steady breathing, and my heart started to sink to it. I turned on my side, facing the wall. I thought sleep would silence whatever it was inside me, but instead I kept listening to his breathing, to the way he shifted under his sheets, to the silence that was suddenly too loud. Then I felt it. The mattress dipped behind me, and a hand brushed against my back. Not accidental. Not rushed. Gentle. Like a question waiting to be answered. I didn't move. I couldn't. Every part of me screamed with tension, fear, confusion, longing. What did it mean? What was he doing? And why did part of me hope he wouldn't stop? I told myself I was probably imagining things, that maybe he just rolled over in his sleep. But then his fingers, warm, deliberate, rested lightly between my shoulder. Blades. Not a dream, not imagination. And sleep was the last thing I wanted. That's where the night began to shift. Not with words. Not with anything loud or clear. Just a quiet moment, a soft touch. And everything I'd buried inside me started to surface, and I knew whatever came next, I'd never forget how it started. Asterisk. You wouldn't think someone like Drew and someone like me would click. He's the kind of guy who plays basketball with his friends every Saturday and can fix a leaky faucet without watching a YouTube tutorial. I'm more of a 3 cups of coffee and a good book kind of person. I organize my closet by color and panic if my phone battery dips below 30%. But somehow, we worked. When I first moved in, things were awkward. He had a sock drawer. I had a label maker. He liked the windows open. I preferred silence and blackout curtains. But it didn't take long before his chaos found a rhythm that didn't mess with mine. Our friendship formed slowly, like the way you break in a new pair of shoes. At first, you're aware of every step. Then one day, you realize it just fits. We had our rituals. Saturday mornings meant pancakes, even if they were slightly burnt, because Drew always insisted on flipping them with a butter knife for the challenge. Tuesdays were for movie marathons, usually bad comedies or old thrillers we'd seen a dozen times. We'd argue about whether the villain had a decent motive or if the hero was overrated. He'd always lean back on the couch, arms wide, legs stretched. I'd curl in on the other side, watching him more than the screen. There was something about our energy when we were alone. Comfortable, sure, but charged too. Like our conversations carried something under the surface neither of us wanted to name, like the time he got food poisoning from a gas station burrito. I stayed up all night next to the bathroom door, handing him water and trying to make him laugh. Through the worst of it. He said, "You're a better nurse than my ex," and I tried not to read into that or the time my dad called and left a message that messed me up. I didn't say much about it, just stared at the wall for longer than I meant to. Drew didn't ask questions. He just handed me a hoodie, the one I always borrowed, and said, "Let's go for a drive." We didn't talk. Just drove around town, windows down, music low. I remember glancing over at him as the wind ruffled his hair and the streetlights lit his face in soft flashes. In that moment, I wanted to reach for his hand. I didn't, but the want stayed with me. We'd always brush things off with humor. Like when he caught me staring a little too long and smirked, "Dude, you good? Or are you just hypnotized by all this?" As he flexed dramatically, I rolled my eyes, threw a pillow at him, and said, "Yeah, I'm just stunned by your fragile ego." But inside, my pulse was already racing. Then there was the beach trip. It was supposed to be with a group, but people bailed last-minute midterms, breakups, excuses. In the end, it was just the two of us. We didn't cancel. Instead, we packed the car with snacks, a cooler, and an old Bluetooth speaker, and drove 3 hours to the coast. That trip changed things. We shared a room with 2 beds pushed apart, but close enough that if either of us turned the wrong way, we could hear the other breathing. On the second night, after hours of talking and a few drinks, he said, "You ever feel like you're waiting on something, but you don't know what it is?" I knew exactly what he meant. He was staring at the ceiling, and I was staring at him. I wanted to say, "I'm waiting on you." Instead, I said, "Yeah, all the time." He looked over, just for a second. His eyes met mine, and something passed between us, quiet but loud enough to hear in my chest. The next morning, we didn't talk about it. We played it cool, made dumb jokes about the seagulls stealing our chips and how I got sunburned in 5 minutes while he tanned like a Greek god. We were good at pretending. Still, there were these moments, like when he gave me his sweatshirt when I was cold and it smelled like his cologne, or when his hand brushed mine as we reached for the same snack. And neither of us pulled away right away. And then there was the shower thing. 2 weeks ago, the hot water went out. Drew was mid-shampoo when it cut. I'd just finished working out and went to grab a water bottle from the kitchen when he came out wrapped in a towel, soaked, shivering. "Dude, I think I lost a nipple," he joked, rubbing his arms. "You mind if I use your shampoo?" I nodded, dumbly, trying not to stare, and handed him the bottle. His fingers touched mine, just barely. He didn't move right away. Neither did I, and I remember thinking, this isn't nothing. This is something, but we never talked about that either. I think we were both afraid of ruining things, of being wrong, but fear doesn't erase longing. It just buries it deeper. And last night, when his hand touched my back in the dark, all of it, the trips, the glances, the almost came rushing back, and I realized maybe he was afraid too. Maybe we both were. And maybe that's why it mattered. It started with a blown fuse. Our entire side of the building went dark, just after midnight lights, heat, Wi-Fi, everything. Drew had been half asleep already, sprawled across his bed in a hoodie and gym shorts, while I was scrolling on my laptop. Headphones in, pretending not to be distracted by the way his biceps stretched the fabric whenever he moved. Then click. Darkness. I pulled the headphones off and sat up. "Did the power just go out?" Drew groaned. "If it did, I didn't do it." This time, I slid off the bed and went to the window. The streetlights were still on. "I think it's just our unit." "Perfect." He sat up, rubbing his face. "Well, guess we're camping tonight. Do we even have flashlights?" He grabbed his phone and flicked on the flashlight. grinning like a 5-year-old with a toy lightsaber. Behold technology. The room glowed dim and warm under the beam. Our walls were suddenly closer, shadows stretching and bending like the space itself had shrunk. Without power, the heat faded quickly. It was early spring, and the building always ran cold. I crossed my arms, trying to keep the chill off. Drew noticed. "You cold?" "I'm fine," I lied. He tossed me the spare hoodie he kept hanging on his chair, the one I always stole on movie nights. "You suck at pretending." I caught it, but didn't put it on immediately. I just stood there, clutching the fabric, trying to push away how his scent always lingered in it. It was the kind of thing that stuck in my lungs and stirred up feelings I didn't have the courage to admit. The fuse box was in the hallway closet, but none of the switches worked. Drew fiddled with it while I stood behind him, shining the flashlight. I couldn't help but notice how close we were, his back brushing against my chest every time he shifted. The warmth of him. The shape of him. "This thing's fried," he said finally. "Guess we're stuck in the dark," I exhaled. "Guess so." We lit 2 candles, one from my knitstand and one he found in the kitchen. With no heat, no distractions, and no light except the soft flicker of wax and wick, the room transformed into something quieter, smaller, more honest. I climbed into my bed, pulling the covers tight. Drew hesitated, then looked across the space between our beds, barely 3 feet. "You mind?" he asked, motioning toward my bed. "I'm freezing," I blinked. "You want to sleep here?" He grinned. "Just until the power comes back." "You run hot, it's practical." I laughed, nervously. Yeah, totally practical. He didn't wait for a clearer answer, just grabbed his blanket and flopped down beside me, shifting until we were shoulder to shoulder under the covers. His leg brushed mine. I stiffened. He noticed. "Relax," he whispered. "I'm not gonna steal the covers." "That's not what I'm worried about," I muttered before I could stop myself. His head turned slightly. "What are you worried about?" I couldn't answer. I stared at the ceiling, heart pounding. This close, I could feel his breath on my cheek. This close, there was nowhere to hide. "You're really tense," he said softly. "Is it me?" "No," I said too quickly. "Yes, I mean, not in a bad way. It's just this is different." "How?" He turned fully now, propping himself on one elbow, looking at me. The candlelight carved soft shadows into his face, made his eyes darker, deeper. My throat tightened. "You're lying next to me," I said quietly. "That's not normal." He gave a lazy smile. "Well, maybe it should be." There was something in his voice. "Not a joke?" Not teasing. He meant it. And that scared me, because part of me had wanted to hear those words for months, but now that I didn't know what to do with them. "What if this messes everything up?" I asked, barely above a whisper. "What?" "If I say something wrong and it ruins everything?" He was silent for a moment, then gently, so gently, he reached out and brushed a strand of hair from my forehead. "What if it doesn't?" I closed my eyes, heart thudding hard against my ribs. The touch was small, simple, but it felt like lightning had touched my skin. He was still watching me. I could feel it. "You always do that," he murmured. "Do what?" "Get so far inside your head you forget how to breathe." I opened my eyes. He was right there. "I don't want to mess this up," I said. "You matter too much." His expression softened. "Josh, you matter too." There it was again, that something in his voice. Not a joke, not a brush off, real. I didn't know what to say. My body ached with tension, with longing, with confusion. I wanted to lean in. I wanted to stay still. I wanted to understand if this was a moment or a mistake. Then, without warning, he shifted again, closer this time, his arm grazing mine, his hand settling just beside mine on the blanket. Our pinkies touched. He didn't move it. Neither did I. The silence thickened, stretching between us like string pulled taut. Then he whispered, "Sometimes I wish you'd just say what you're thinking." My lips parted, but nothing came out, because what I was thinking was, "I want you to kiss me." What I was thinking was, "Please feel the same way." And what I was afraid of was that if I said those words, he wouldn't. So instead I said nothing, just stayed there in the quiet dark, hoping he could hear everything I couldn't say. After a moment, he gave a soft sigh, turned onto his back again. "It's okay," he said gently. You don't have to. Not yet. Not yet, like he already knew, like he'd been waiting to eventually. His breathing slowed but mine didn't, because I knew something had shifted. Not just in the room, but in us and the scariest part wasn't what had happened it was knowing that next time, I might not be able to hold back. It had been 3 days since the night, Drew. Crawled into my bed. 3 days of pretending it hadn't happened. The power had come back the next morning. And with it, our unspoken agreement to act like everything was fine. He woke up first, stretched, tossed me a sleepy smile, and said, "Thanks for not kicking me out." I gave a half laugh, half nod, and we went back to being roommates. Back to pancakes and sarcastic comments and avoiding eye contact when things got too quiet, but something had changed. Not on the surface, we still talked about class, joked about who had worse taste in movies, still argued about whether pineapple belonged on pizza. It didn't, but beneath it all was tension. Heavy electric tension that never left the room. The thing about silence is that, when charged with enough emotion, it becomes deafening. I could feel it when we sat side by side on the couch, our shoulders just barely touching. When he laughed a little too hard at something I said. When I'd glance at him from the corner of my eye and catch him already watching me, only for him to look away just a beat too late. It was driving me insane, and still I stayed silent, because I didn't want to lose him. I kept thinking, what if I'm wrong? What if that night meant nothing to him? But doubt has a way of corroding everything. It all came to a head on a Thursday night. I'd had a rough day, bombed a psych quiz, spilled coffee on my notes, got a vague "we need to talk" text from my mom that never followed up. By the time I got home, I was tightly wound and exhausted. Drew was on the couch in a plain white tee and basketball shorts, tossing popcorn into his mouth and watching some dumb alien documentary. He looked up when I walked in and immediately frowned. "You okay?" I didn't answer. I just dropped my bag, kicked off my shoes, and headed to the fridge. "Josh?" I paused, my hand on the fridge door, back still turned. "I'm fine." "You're not," he said, softer now. "What happened?" I let the door close, leaning against it. "It's just one of those days." He got up and crossed the room. I felt his presence behind me, close but not touching. My heart beat faster. "You want to talk about it?" he asked. I shook my head. "No." A pause, then his voice quiet. "Okay, then do you want me to just be here?" Something about the way he said that cracked something in me. I turned to face him, and for once, I didn't try to hide what was in my eyes. "I don't know what we're doing, Drew." He blinked. "What do you mean?" I gestured vaguely between. "Us, the tension, the weird silences. You climbing into my bed and acting like it was no big deal. Me pretending it didn't completely mess with my head." He didn't say anything. I stepped back, suddenly feeling vulnerable and exposed. Look, maybe I read everything wrong. Maybe I'm just a roommate who catches feelings for people he shouldn't, but I can't do this half-truth thing anymore. Still, he said nothing. I shook my head. "Forget it." Just then he stepped forward and grabbed my wrist gently. "Stop," I froze. His voice was low, trembling. "You didn't read it wrong." My breath caught. He looked down, then up again. Eyes stormy. That night, I wasn't asleep. "When I touched your back, I was wide awake. I've been lying there for hours trying to talk myself out of it, but I just could not reach for you." I stared at him. He kept going, the words spilling out now like they'd been trapped too long. "I've been fighting this for months, telling myself it was just comfort or habit or hormones or whatever excuse I could come up with. But I feel it, Josh, every time you laugh at one of my dumb jokes. Every time I see you wearing my hoodie. Every time I look at you and think, God, if you only knew." I swallowed hard. "And then why didn't you say anything?" "Because I didn't want to lose you," he said, voice cracking. I thought if I ignored it, it would go away. But it didn't. It just got stronger and scarier. I couldn't speak, not because I didn't have anything to say, but because my chest was too full of it. He looked at me then. Really looked, his eyes open, raw. "I don't know what happens next. I'm still figuring out what this means for me. But I know one thing, when I'm around you, I feel more like myself than I ever have. And when I'm not around you, it's like something's missing. My eyes stung. I stepped closer, slowly. He didn't move. My hand brushed his. He laced his fingers with mine, hesitantly, like he was still waiting for me to pull away. I didn't. I felt it too, I said, barely above a whisper. Every second, every look. Every time I wanted to say something and didn't. His thumb brushed over mine. Then why didn't you? I gave a shaky laugh, because I thought I was the only one. Silence again. But this time it was the good kind. The kind that felt full instead of empty. He stepped closer, so close I could feel the heat of him, the rhythm of his breath. His free hand came up slowly, hovering near my face. Can I nodded. He leaned in and I closed the distance. Our lips met softly, not rushed, not desperate. Just real. I felt him exhale into the kiss like he'd been holding his breath for weeks. His hand slid to the back of my neck, pulling me just a little closer. I melted into him. When we finally pulled apart, I rested my forehead against his. Okay? I whispered. Yeah? Yeah, he smiled, and I realized I hadn't seen him smile like that before. Not like that. Not with that kind of peace behind it. We stood there for a long time saying nothing. Just breathing. Holding on. And for the first time in a long time, the silence between us didn't feel like something to fear. It felt like the beginning of something real. We didn't move for a while after the kiss. It wasn't that we were frozen. It was more like we'd finally stepped into something too delicate to rush. His hand was still on the back of my neck, fingers slightly curled in my hair. Mine rested against his chest, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breathing like an anchor. Eventually, we pulled apart, just enough to see each other's faces. Drew let out a breathy laugh. Okay, so that just happened. Yeah, I said softly. It really did. He rubbed the back of his neck, suddenly sheepish. I was so sure I'd messed that up. I gave him a half smile. You didn't? Not even close? He grinned and let out a low chuckle. You always say stuff like that with this calm voice, but your ears turn red every time. My hand flew to my ear. Do not start psychoanalyzing my ears. He leaned in a little, teasing. I mean, it's kind of cute. You blush in reverse. I rolled my eyes, but my cheeks were burning now, too. This is why I didn't tell you earlier. You're already impossible to deal with. He nudged me with his shoulder. Yeah, but now you like me, so you're stuck. I'm still considering my options, I deadpanned. Sure you are. We ended up back on the couch, side by side. Under the same blanket we used to watch movies under before everything changed. But this time, his arm was around me, and my head rested against his chest. His heartbeat was steady and slow, and it matched the rhythm of my thoughts. Finally quiet. So what now? I asked after a long stretch of silence. Drew tilted his head. You mean like tonight? I mean like, this. I lifted my hand slightly, gesturing between us. Is this a one-night courage thing, or are we doing this for real? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached over and took my hand, threading his fingers through mine. I don't want this to be a moment, he said. I want it to be a start. I looked at him, like, I'm not saying I have everything figured out, he continued. I still don't know how to explain this to my brothers or if I'm ready for a full-blown relationship overnight. But I know I don't want to go back to pretending. My grip tightened around his hand. Me neither. He turned to face me more fully. I've never felt like this before. Not with anyone. You make me want to be honest. And that's, scary, but it also feels really damn good. My throat tightened again. You don't have to be perfect? We don't have to label everything right now. I just want to know that this matters to you. He nodded, his expression serious now. It does, it really does. I leaned against him again, letting his warmth seep into me. Everything felt softer. Now, like the air between us had been cleared. There was still uncertainty, sure, but there was also this quiet certainty between us. Humming beneath the surface, we didn't need to say everything at once. Just being together like this, without the constant weight of pretending, was enough for now. Drew broke the quiet again. So, if we're officially unofficially something, do I still get to call you out for eating cereal with a fork? I looked up at him. It was one time. And the spoons were all dirty, he grinned. It's a red flag. You're a red flag. He laughed, leaned down, and kissed my forehead. Then I guess you're into red flags, I smiled, eyes fluttering shut. Yeah, I guess I am. We stayed like that for hours watching the flickering screen, stealing glances, whispering inside jokes that had new weight now. At one point, I looked up and caught him watching me again. This time, he didn't look away. Hey, I said softly. Yeah? I don't want to lose this. He nodded. You won't. And somehow I believed him. A week later, we went grocery shopping together like we always did on Sundays, but this time, something was different. We didn't talk about it much, not directly. We didn't sit down and map out who we were or what we were now. But things shifted in the smallest, warmest ways that felt more real than any conversation could explain. Like how, while we were walking down the frozen foods aisle, Drew reached out and hooked his pinky with mine. Not our full hands, just pinkies, casual, easy, but his touch lingered. He didn't look at me when he did it, didn't need to. I didn't say anything either. I just held on. We were quiet for a few moments, just pushing the cart. Then he bumped my shoulder gently and said, We forgot almond milk again, Professor Psychology. I smirked. You're the one who put cheese puffs in the fridge last night. I don't think you get to call me names. Okay, that was one time. 3. He gave me a playful look and leaned in close enough that I could smell his cologne, the one I'd once borrowed just so I could keep the scent on me. You're keeping count now? I shrugged. Someone has to hold this household to a higher standard. He smiled. And in that smile, I saw something I hadn't seen in him before: comfort. Not the kind of comfort that comes from habit or laziness, the kind that says, I see you. I'm choosing this. When we got home, he tossed me a box of cereal, my favorite. Brandon said, Already had it in the cart before you noticed. See? I'm learning. I froze, the box in my hand. You remembered. He rubbed the back of his neck. Yeah, I guess I pay attention more than you think. I didn't know what to say. So I set the box down, crossed the kitchen, and hugged him. Not a side hug, not a bro pat on the back, a real hug. Long. Still, he melted into it. Later that night, we were curled up on the couch again, this time under one blanket instead of two. The room was dim, and our movie had long since ended. I'd stopped pretending to watch it after the first 20 minutes. My head was on his chest, one of his hands resting on my waist. His voice broke the silence. So, do you think we should? I don't know. Tell people. I looked up. Like who? He shrugged. Friends, your sister. My disaster of a fantasy football group chat? I laughed. Let's not start with the group chat. He grinned. Yeah, probably smart. Then, more quietly, we don't have to rush it. I'm okay going slow, I nodded. Me too. Whatever this is, I don't need it to be loud, I just want it to be honest. He reached for my hand and laced our fingers together. It is. I promise. And I believed him, because even though we hadn't said the word relationship out loud, we were already building something. Something with inside jokes and half-finished sentences, with quiet breakfasts and hoodie borrowing and almond milk reminders. It wasn't perfect. It didn't need to be. We had each other, and we were trying, and that felt like enough. Before bed, we brushed our teeth side by side at the sink. He spit. Before I did, and grinned into the mirror. Race you to bed. Race me? I laughed, mouthful of toothpaste. What are we, 5? He leaned close, whispering with a mischievous grin. If I win, I get to be Big Spoon. I choked on my toothpaste. He ran. I finished brushing and followed, finding him already tangled in my sheets, arms wide open like I belonged there. I didn't hesitate. I climbed in beside him, and he wrapped himself around me without a word, and in the dark, just before sleep, tugged at the edges of me, I whispered, You're not gonna run tomorrow, are you? Nope, he murmured against my neck. Not unless it's toward you. It was cheesy, ridiculous, very him, but I smiled anyway, because after all the pretending and silence and longing, his voice in the dark, his warmth beside me, the quiet way we were becoming something real was exactly what I'd been waiting for, and it was just the beginning.